Hi guys, welcome to another beautiful game from the round one of the Africa Super Zonal Chess Championship 2025, which takes place in City Heights Luxury Hotel, Ikeja, Lagos, Nigeria. This is a game between Shrook and Wafa Shrook from, let me check her nationality. Uh, well, I can't see it here yet, but I know her opponent is a Nigerian. That's why I pick full interest in this game. Yeah. So again, SULEIMAN, Azumi Ayisha. So Aisha is playing black, while Wafa playing white. Wafa is rated around 2000, 2182 against Aisha 1900, 1975. The gap is there. However, let's enjoy this beautiful game and see what it has to offer us. This game starts with pawn to a4 as Wafa opened up with the king's pawn. So we have c6. Quickly, after two moves, we see the Caro-Kann defense on the board. These d5 moves came with the response pawn takes on d5, pawn takes, and now we have this. Knight to f3 by white, knight to c6, pawn push. Why? So early. If pawn takes, then bishop takes. With tempo, white gets the bishop active for free. In turn, free up the f1 square, preparing to castle as quick as possible. So after c4 in this particular game, what we notice is that, you see, the players take their time to think before making any move. And that is what you should learn as an upcoming chess player. If you're a beginner in positions like this, where you are unclear with some certain moves, you don't just grab pieces anyhow. These are lessons I learned the hard way. I lost a lot of good games with good positions before, saying I've learned my lesson. So, as for you coming up, you see, these players do not just play anyhow. Moreover, it's a classical event. See the time control 1 hour, 31 minutes, and so on, and some increments. Well, you see, what Aisha played here was pawn to e6. Why? I think pawn takes, she's going to return that pawn there, replace that pawn in that position, just reload the pawn there and still have some control in the center. Knight comes in to c3, knight to f6, c5. Wafa instantly expand towards black camp, and at the point in time, she's limiting the strength of this dark squared bishop for black. The bishop has where to go to, yes, but just only one square, which is making the bishop not too strong compared to this dark square bishop for white player. Okay, bishop e7 with intention to castle the king away from the center. Here, white developed this bishop to b5. Black castles, white castles, queen comes to c7. King, the rook moves to b1. Here we have pawn. You see, the purpose of pawn push to a6 is what? To attack the bishop. I have formed a habit not to allow my opponent detect my move. So, in some positions, I just take the bishop back home instantly. However, Wafa choose to play it this way. She played bishop to a4. Aisha went on to attack the bishop further with pawn push to b5. This attack is cool. Well, I see another intention here. Another intention. Let me show you. This pawn at the moment can be taken by en passant. It's possible. By doing this, queen takes, we now have a very good open diagonal for the bishop. And at the same time, you see, this pawn becomes a weak pawn, isolated. No neighboring pawn around, no pawn on the c file, no pawn on the e file. So I think that move is that reason is why Aisha played that move, pawn push to b5, attacking the bishop. After b5, you see, Wafa choose not to take on passant, still keeping this diagonal closed by these connected pawns. She decided to go with an idea, bishop to c2. Here, Aisha furthermore pressed charges by going after the bishop with knight to b4. Wafa says, okay, I don't want you to take my bishop. I want to still use my bishop on this board. For this reason, she went on to play bishop to b3 because I was trying to understand why each move, why these certain moves. So I came up with those ideas. This time around, since the knight is no more attacking the bishop, there can be a pawn push to kick the knight back. Here, bishop to b7, activating the bishop, then a3 follows, attacking the knight. What do? There's a threat on the board, you need to attend to it. That is why Aisha went for knight back home to c6. Rook to e1, a very understanding move. This move brings the rook to an open file. This is not a totally free file, actually, just semi-opened. So if you are looking for ideas in the middle game, this is one. You have checked all your pieces, they are in good conditions, no threat at the moment. Look for an inactive piece, such as this rook when it was on f1, doing nothing. Activate it, then you have a move. And with this reason, you have done something. So in this case, it is black to play. Black went on with the rook too. You see, I have some things that give me purpose to do certain things. I will explain that. You see this particular position here. There's a rook now standing on d8. And I have a queen standing on d1. They are on the same file. You see, my opponent will love to create ideas along this particular file if he or she gets this kind of position against me. So what I've done is that in the past, if I see something like this, immediately this move happens, is either I take my queen off this file or I plan to take it off the file, one way or the other. Well, here what happened? What did white play? White went on with this idea, bishop instead. Knight came in. So I must address something very carefully. Because of this rook is standing on d8, having an extra attack on the queen on d1. This move was made possible because of that arrangement. This positional understanding made it possible for this move to come alive. Well, you will see that reason in the next few moves. It seems as if black is giving out a pawn, but black will take the pawn back tactically with this following strategy. Now let's just check it together. You see, in this position, the bishop can take, the rook can take, the knight can take. Taking with the rook is out of it. You are giving out material. So let's talk about taking with the knight. If you take with the knight, pawn takes, bishop takes. Now this pawn is pinned to the queen, so it cannot move at the moment to the side. So this will enable black take back a pawn by bishop takes pawn on c5. You see, so this idea came alive due to 3 moves back after rook on f to d8. So in your own games, if you decide not to allow this happen, you first of all attend to the position of that particular queen. So you don't have this kind of thing alive. However, this was not played in the game. I'm just showing you what is possible if knight has taken knight and bishop take last in that variation. Here, to keep material or to hold on to the tension, white can just continue with this move, bishop to e3, and the game is cool. If you come back to knight to e4, in the game, I think, yes, white went on to capture first with the bishop. Pawn takes, knight takes. Her reason, or I would say, the reason for using the bishop first and ending the movement with the knight is to defend this. So bishop cannot take now because bishop takes, knight will take instead of the pawn. With this understood, there is still a loophole here. In this position, instead of taking this pawn now, this is the pawn that is now available to be captured. And I will show you in some variation. So instead of taking this now, because of this knight, the beautiful arrangement in this middle game was played by Ayisha. After taking this knight took, she played a great move, pawn push to e5. However, in this position, if I am to modify the responses here, according to the researchers, to keep this tension and to keep the position locked and still have hold in the center, bishop will not take, knight will not take. Just go on with knight to e2. Just holding the center is cool. This is a slow way, gentle way, and a subtle approach to this position. You are still holding the grip. So in this position, if a move like this follows, like queen to d7, just cement everywhere up with pawn to b4. Yeah, this is how white can continue without giving out the stronghold in the center. However, after knight to e7, it was bishop takes, knight takes, then we have this. After knight takes, then pawn push. Notice this thing. Those two strong pawns here now standing on this diagonal vanished. How? This is a stronghold. You can't take the knight away. So, Wafa playing the white pieces decided to go for a concept, keeping the queen safe. So she played queen to g4. This could come up after pawn takes or rook takes. So, this is a very good position that demands understanding. If pawn takes, you are good to go. However, in the game, rook takes the knight for this purpose, so that the rook here can exert pressure on the knight, supported by the bishop, and still create a pin to the queen. So in this position here, you see, this pawn is as good as free pawn, since if bishop takes, knight cannot take the queen with 4. So what do you do here as someone playing the white pieces? Well, f3 was played by Wafa, and this f3 is a blunder already, since this knight cannot move. There's a variation that continues after bishop takes the pawn. Yes, if the knight takes, then the queen falls. You can just simply sign on your paper as white player, submit your script, and resign from here. Then you go home. However, there's a variation also that continues probably with instead of knight taking, you can just play with bishop to e3. If bishop go to e3, first of all, eliminate the knight. You get pawn takes, then slide the rook. You see, bishop takes, queen takes, check, king just go inside. This variation allows black to have one extra pawn advantage. And with a pawn advantage, you can simply try to secure a victory from here. So, back to f3. What did Ayisha play as someone playing the black pieces? First of all, she rearranged the variation. She immediately played bishop takes the knight on e4, eliminating the defender of this pawn. Here, queen cannot take. Instead, Wafa went on with pawn takes, then bishop take the pawn. This move in turn creates a structure, a pattern that could breed a discovered attack. So, the only move here is to move the king, and that is what Wafa played. Queen to d7, going for queen exchange on this board, but Wafa declined. Rook goes down to d1. If rook takes, check. Queen takes, check. Queen blocks, queen takes, and this is checkmate. This is why Wafa look for a counter in this position by playing bishop, going all straight to h6. And this bishop h6 move creates a threat of checkmate in one, if not fully observed. How did Ayisha continue from here? She went on with rook takes, rook check, rook takes. Here, pawn push. She placed an in-between move, then defended that square with the queen by just pushing the pawn. Pawn push, creating room so that the king can have an escape square. King moves. Now this pawn is no more pinned to the king, so the pawn can take the bishop. Hence, bishop came back home for safety. Rook supports the queen, pawn push. Here, queen goes to d3, hoping for queen trade on the board. But Wafa declined. In this light, queen to c2 comes up. Queen to c2 is very dangerous, such that you are preparing rook coming down to trade off the rook. If rook comes down, just imagine rook takes, queen takes. That's with check, right? King moves, then we pick up the bishop. Very understanding, logical idea, which provokes a tactical combination. Here, the concept also is clear. After pawn push, pawn takes, queen check to the king, then the rook is going. Many tactics in the position. What to do? h6 comes up. In this light, pawn takes, queen takes with check, king moves. This happens. That's loss of material. So instead, how was this case handled by Ayisha? She went on to play rook to d1 right away, going for her own attack in the back rank against the enemy king. Since the queen is standing here, there is still a room for bishop goes to f2, attacking the queen, attacking the rook. A very beautiful skewer attack. Here, there is pawn takes on g7 with check. It would be a very big mistake if king takes that pawn. Why did I say so? You need to connect dots before you take anything on the board. And this is one of the reasons. With this particular move, queen to j4 check to the king, you are now attacking the rook twice. If the king move, then rook takes, because you want to have access to this particular square d7. So if rook comes check, king goes check, king move, and there's a checkmate. So to avoid this after pawn push to avoid this after pawn takes, Ayisha went on with king to g8. Very logical and simple. What to do? Here, bishop came in. Bishop defends the pawn. Queen takes pawn is coming. Queen goes to f8 is coming. Even if bishop takes, pawn takes promotes to a queen, and that threat is deadly. The threat of checkmate. How can Ayisha handle this? Well, first of all, she disconnected the queen and the rook by playing bishop to f2, attacking the queen. Queen took the pawn with the interest to play queen to f8. Mate in one. Very dangerous. She's under pressure. What will she do? How can she cope here? Well, there is a forcing move, and that forcing move is a saving grace. She saw these moves back to back that gave her this game, and that's a beautiful approach. In this position, she instantly went on with rook takes the rook on e1 check. King goes in, and the pressure is still on. There is no defense against checkmate in one. The threat by Wafa against the black king is still here. What to do? You can pause this video from here and try to look for the finishing move. However, if you spot rook sacrifice, yeah, you are just too tactical and strong. King takes, queen to d1 check, king move, then this checkmate happens. After the queen blocks, queen takes, and that's checkmate. I think in this position already, White just resigned and she secured a victory. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to more videos from the Africa Super Chess Championship 2025.